We thank you, Holy Father, for this time we can spend with you. We lay our stony hearts before you, Lord, and ask that you replace them with a flesh one, so that we may have the ability to understand and to receive your word, Lord. For only you can do these things, and your people know this. So we ask you to open up our hearts and our minds, that we may understand your holy word. And we praise in your holy and mighty name, in the name of Yeshua, through the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen. Okay. Number 5 from Guadalupe camp meeting is what we're working on. And this one just had the title of Acts 27, but it's really not Acts 27, but as we go through it, we'll see. Some review in the beginning. In the last study, we were talking about Acts 27, which linked us to Pyrrhus. So everybody remembers that through the number 273, partly because of the number 273, also because we're covering the history that relates to the King of the South. We identified that where Acts 27 brought us was to the life of a king called Pyrrhus. And as we've begun to identify, it takes place in 2 parts, the Alpha and Omega. First, there is a history of Macedonia, which we've already traced. And this is the line up here. I think you guys can see it. I have something in my way on my screen, but this is the line. This was the, Pyrrhus and Macedonia is in here. But you have this whole line from the, after the death of Alexander, we started back 317 after the death, so at 323. So first there's the history of Macedonia, which we've already traced, the line from 317 to 285. Macedonia, like I said, is maybe it's when Pyrrhus comes in to the scene here. Maybe somebody else has it more straight to make sure. No, because Macedonia is divided, so the Macedonia part is right in here. So now there's a second history. Pyrrhus was not successful when his campaigns were directed into the Greek world of Macedonia and these generals, Alexander's empire. So Pyrrhus is forced to find a new field, and where he chooses to go is into Italy and into war with Rome. And now it's war between the north and the south, Italy between Rome and north and south of Italy between Rome and Pyrrhus, which Pyrrhus is allied with Tarentum. So this north and south here, North Italy and South Italy, and Pyrrhus is allied with Tarentum. In 285, we find Thurii, another city-state that was generally under the sphere of influence of Tarentum, changes its allegiance to that of Rome. You can mark that twice in this history, 285 and 282 BC. In 282 BC, Rome responds and breaks an agreement it had with Tarentum. Tarentum responds by attacking Thurii. Tarentum attacks Thurii. And this leads to war with Rome. So there's war now between Rome and Tarentum. So if everybody remembers that Thurii decided to go with Rome to be their help when they were being battered by barbarians, if I understood correctly what we were talking about last week. And so Thurii decides not to go with Tarentum, but rather to have Rome be their support, which sparks a problem between Tarentum and Thurii. Anyway, so there's a treaty, if we remember right as well, there's a treaty that had...
The Gauls.
The Gauls, thank you. The Gauls? Oh. Yeah, they're the North. They're the North.
No, the barbarians. That just popped into my head.
Yeah.
Let me look at that.
I think I said
it's
it started with a G. Last
How,
week, I think I said it started with a G,
Yeah,
but I
I
couldn't
think you're
remember which
right.
ones they were.
how did the first,
Um, so there was a treaty that Rome would not come into the Gulf of Tarentum, but what they wound up doing in support of Thurii, they wound up setting a garrison here in Thurii in the Gulf of Tarentum. And so they broke that treaty, which sparks this war. So let's see. Tarentum responds by attacking Thurii, and this leads to war with Rome. So there's a war now between Rome and Tarentum. Tarentum is not strong enough to defeat Rome alone, so they ask King Pyrrhus to fight on their behalf. So in 280 BC, Pyrrhus sails up to Tarentum. And he brings all these city-states into allegiance. He begins to prepare Tarentum itself for war with Rome. Rome descends on the south later that same year, initiating the first battle before Pyrrhus was ready. So he wasn't ready yet for battle. They meet at Heraclea, and Pyrrhus is victorious against Rome because of the new weapon, the war elephants, that Rome had not seen before. It's winter, so both sides withdraw and prepare to fight again in the spring. So they had the Battle of Heraclea here in 280. This 280 is when Pyrrhus arrives in Tarentum, and then Rome is descending upon Pyrrhus and upon Tarentum, and Rome attacks before Pyrrhus is ready. But Pyrrhus has the war elephants, and he actually wins this battle at Heraclea. They part for the winter, and be preparing for Asculum. So the following spring, they meet at Asculum. Rome has spent the winter preparing for the elephants by building up these carts, but it was failure for Rome. The elephants just broke them apart. And Pyrrhus wins again, thanks to his elephants. We also see that Pyrrhus is losing men, and he can't win many more times before his army is so weakened that it can't fight. So he makes a temporary peace with Rome, and instead engages on this new plan to build up his strength more gradually, beginning with the island of Sicily. So just to back up, they make this treaty. Let's see. So they make a temporary peace treaty with Rome, and instead he engages on this new plan to build up his strength more gradually, beginning with the island of Sicily. So thinking that if he can take Sicily, he can also take Carthage. Carthage is powerful. They have the resources and knowledge to build a powerful navy because of their coastal location along the north of Africa. I'm going to hold my place there. Go ahead and say what you want to.
Yeah, Gauls was one of them. Etruscans, Gauls, and Samnites. And the Romans defeated these peoples in various battles over a number of years.
Over the northern Italy, right? But they were still bothering the southern Italy, is that right?
Yeah. Oh,
and
I
so
knew something. Yeah, you're right. Something with the G. I thought that too. Okay, cool.
I was going to say Goths, but
That
it's Gauls.
itch has been scratched and it's been waiting.
So Pyrrhus was going to build an immense navy there and come around to Greece and Macedonia and fight with our familiar faces, particularly the generals of Lysimachus and Seleucus, and probably also face Ptolemy in Egypt. He was then going to come back around, become king of Macedonia, and sweep back into Rome. Pyrrhus had this circular plan. He's still going to take Rome, but more gradually. So that's where our story ended. So there's a depiction of these elephant carts, if that's true. This is one that I thought in trying to search them out. But Asculum is won again by the elephants. The carts were crushed by the elephants. But also Pyrrhus is losing many men. So Pyrrhus sailed down to Sicily, and he quickly freed the island from the control of Carthage. This is where he really went wrong. He wanted to become king of everything. His plans were so big that he needed to rule in a different way. The people of Sicily were not just going to build him an army and a navy, and very willingly. They needed a little bit of force. They called Pyrrhus to their country to free them from dictatorship, and they didn't expect him to be another dictator. But when he sailed down to Sicily and freed them, he took control of the island and started to abuse his new power, imprisoning the leadership of the island. killing or imprisoning those who spoke against him, and forcing the people to start building this navy for his plan that he has. And as they start to resist, he exercises more and more force. And very quickly they realize that they have another dictatorship, and that's worse than Carthage was. So what Carthage gave them was better than what Pyrrhus was doing. So the population was beginning to wish they had their old dictatorship back. Pyrrhus is also running out of money because he wants to build this massive navy, and it takes money. So he is also having financial trouble. To become king of everything takes a lot of resources, finances, and people, and he is struggling with that. So he takes some advice and he goes to an ancient temple. I don't know what she meant, if anybody has any insight on that. So somebody actually advised him to go to this temple, is what it sounds like. And I didn't research that.
He knew about this temple that has all this treasure underneath.
So then he goes.
Everybody knew about it.
Okay. So then he goes to this ancient temple. There's a goddess in Sicily in this massive temple, and underneath is buried this treasure, all the gold and offerings that have been given to this deity. And facing financial, it's interesting. So they just bury it. It comes to this fake deity that doesn't even exist, and they just bury money when what is useless, right?
But remember, every country, their treasure was in the temple, even at Jerusalem. They were having all the treasure in the temple. You know, the gods were made of gold.
Right.
Everything there was gold and precious stones and stuff like that. So they all knew kind of where to go to get the treasure.
Copycats too, because
that's how it
counterfeits.
They would dedicate it to the god that helped them win or whatever.
We kind of have that with museums and stuff.
But it's where they kept the country treasury, like
the national treasure.
Yeah.
So in facing financial trouble, Pyrrhus desecrates that temple. He raids it and takes all of its wealth and puts it on ships. Then he sails these ships back to Tarentum to fund this war effort. But these ships encounter a storm, they're destroyed, and all the wealth that has been placed on them from this temple was spread over the coastline, and this caused Pyrrhus to panic.
Can I say something real quick? This is before the last battle where he loses, right?
Yes, it's after Asculum, before Beneventum.
So
he's a dictator.
This is the second witness of a desecration of a temple. So we have to see Putin do this. Do you see what I'm saying? Because not all the characteristics go over, but you had Ptolemy Philopator do this kind of thing, and you have Pyrrhus do it in that same time period.
It's before Beneventum. It's before Panium.
It's before Panium.
After Raphael.
Yes. So it's between the two. So we have to see him get, full of himself and start ordering people around and being a vicious king and just desecrate a temple. That's two witnesses of it. Two different sets of lines. Right?
And it's that lifting himself up that brings him down, right?
Yeah.
It causes him to fail.
So we've got something to look for in this next time period.
Somebody else have to monitor the chat if you could, because when I have slideshow on, it's hard to see it.
So, well, we don't know because it's not the king of the north.
What's the question?
Jonathan is asking, what is a temple today? So I don't know, but if you look at where that desecration of the temple happens in the Syrian wars, Ptolemy Philopator desecrated a temple of some of his people in his own land. In this story, he does it to not the king of the north. It's another people. What are they?
Satellite countries.
It's not a satellite country. It's the word, the sea. What are they? No, the sea. The ones that they were fighting with. They were contending with Rome. They were the other big power that was centered in Spain. What was the name of this island that they went to? Sicily. Oh, the name starts with C.
Carthage.
The Carthaginians. Thank you. So the Carthaginians were as powerful, if not more powerful than Rome. They were more intelligent. They had everything better. And it was by almost some sheer dumb luck after many failed battles that Rome finally won, because Carthage was way stronger and they were way more advanced historically, if you look. So I don't know who that might be. I don't know. But Carthage and Rome were constantly at war. I don't know if China comes into it. I don't know what this means. But Putin goes where to inflate his finances? That's a big country that's contending with the King of the North. I don't know. It's something.
Syria.
No, Syria doesn't have that kind of wealth. But China would, because we just went into that video last night where they have that deal with the pipeline and the biggest buyer, right?
Yeah.
They have that
And that's
commerce
part of
going on.
that's part of the fulfillment as well,
Yeah,
is China.
yeah. So we'll
Yeah.
see.
So that would mean that, okay, so
Because it's a very advanced. I can't say that in the Middle East they're on the scale. Because size and intelligence wise, they're as good as, if not better than, the King of the North at that time. Carthage was. So
okay, so Asculum is Raphia. Everybody understand that? So that's 2019, right? Asculum is 2019. And we're in this time period here before Beneventum. And I just want to make sure that I'm understanding what you're saying. So Pyrrhus abandons his Macedonian battles, and he's having these battles with
Italy.
Italy here,
With Rome up in the north. Yeah.
with Rome in the north.
He wins too, but the second one he says, if I win another one, I'm going to be destroyed.
Lose. So now he decides to go to Sicily to think that he can take out Carthage, and Carthage has all the
Not take out. He went there to build
his army.
Because Carthage was in Spain, but they had taken over the island of Sicily, which is that rock hitting Italy on the boot, right? That's that area.
Well, looking at the map, Carthage is underneath, and it's down connected to Africa. You said that before, but I went back and checked the map. Carthage.
Did it start in North Africa? Because I know they had stuff in Spain.
Carthage is up near Egypt.
Well, something happened because they were contending for that whole Mediterranean area. So they could have started in North Africa, but they had moved out. You know how you see that map, all Mediterranean, all the little countries around it, and you see the red of Rome spread across. Carthage did the same thing. They ended up making naval ships that were advanced way before Rome did, and Rome got the idea from them. So they had, people in Sicily, they had people all around that Mediterranean border.
But wasn't that there was some type of war in Carthage that he went to help with?
In Carthage?
Yeah,
Pyrrhus?
yeah.
I don't remember that.
He goes to Sicily because he wants to rebuild his army,
Yeah.
and he hopes to take Carthage after he takes Sicily. That's what it was said, that he had hoped to take Carthage after taking Sicily. But he winds up being a worse dictator
Yeah, that's okay.
than what Carthage had. So I think, if I'm following what you're saying, that after Raphia, which is where we're at now, Putin.
So they did. They had a huge section in the top part of Africa, right by Sicily, and they had a huge section in Spain.
Do you have a map up there? You want to put it up?
Yeah, where's the thing?
I think I have to make my slideshow start over again, though, don't I?
I don't know.
We'll see.
Where is this taking you to? Live, blah, 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 blah. Okay. Let me look.
Yeah, see, it's right there by Africa, right?
Yes.
On top of Africa.
But, so they colonized Sicily. They colonized these islands. I don't remember what they are. And these,
Where is Italy? Where is the boot?
this is the boot, Mom.
Oh, okay. I was seeing these different.
But they had this huge area in Spain also. I'm pretty sure that's Spain, if I remember right. But they were like, see, they took all these little edges around the Mediterranean border with their navy. They were doing the same thing that Rome was doing. And that's
Which one
what
is Sicily?
Sicily is, the rock that hits the boot. You can think of that as the 100 God's people is Sicily.
It hits it at the toes.
Yeah, right there on the toe. Anyways, so this.
No accidents in anything.
Yeah, and so you had Rome expanding here, you had Carthage expanding here, and they were battling and contending. So it's a huge economic war that they were having. You know what I'm saying? That's why I'm thinking it's China, because they were vying for economic wealth, for the trading routes of that whole Mediterranean region.
And so the China pipeline, they get the construction and contracts in 2014, right?
Yeah.
In 2019.
Are you guys talking? It's not hearing you.
Yeah, we're talking. Can you hear us?
I can hear you now.
I don't know if it was the internet thing or not. You have an internet thing every now and then. It goes out, I notice, because when I'm at home, I notice it. I'm sorry.
There's not, I mean, we've tried rebooting it and never helps, so there's nothing we can do.
Let me see if I can get back to my.
Anyways, I'm not saying that's a for sure. I'm just saying in my mind it seems to fit a little bit.
Yeah,
And
because
so it's interesting to think about.
between Raphia and Panium, he lifts himself up, right?
Yep.
Desecrates the temple. Okay.
Because that's the two witnesses, isn't it? Is what I'm thinking. Because you had that happen with Ptolemy Philopator, and you have that happen with Pyrrhus
Where he lifts himself up.
in the same exact time period.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so Pyrrhus desecrates that temple. Let's see, I'm on the last sentence there. And in his language after this time, all the way to his death, basically the way he spoke anyways, was that everything that was failing after was the judgment of this goddess for desecrating her temple. So he desecrates this temple, but from there on out, everything that's failing that comes upon him, he says it's because of the desecrating of that temple. What temple does he desecrate?
So right, so back to John's question, was it to desecrate the goddess, or was it to just take the gold and the money? Was that his thing?
Well, that means desecrating.
Yeah.
Because he didn't go there by being invited, come and get it. He had to get over some people to go get the gold.
So he went into a restricted area to get wealth, economic wealth. I don't know.
Yeah.
So maybe it's something like that with food. I don't know, but we're
But
gonna
it has to be a
definitely-
place where there's economic wealth though, right? So it wouldn't be
Think so.
Africa, because we know that he's gone into Africa too.
Yeah. I don't know. I just think China, that thing that she pointed out with China last night was really interesting with the pipeline. Because that's the one where you have this huge economic war and with China, with the United States, with tariffs. And they're having problems because you have that whole issue with steel, and now, they're all suppliers to all these countries all around the world. So when they're having this battle, all of a sudden it affects Canada, South America, all these places that are industrial, trying to build things that have all these factories, and they can't anymore. Sorry. So I don't know. We'll see what happens. Time will tell.
So back on the little map we have here, we do have Sicily, but we don't have Carthage, which is down in here. I tried to find some good maps with it. I might have one later, I can't remember. So in this history after the Battle of Asculum, this is where we're at in here. We're in Sicily, he behaves like a dictator and he desecrates the temple. The situation gets so bad in Sicily that they write to Carthage and ask Carthage to come and free them from Pyrrhus. So first they asked Pyrrhus to come and free them from Carthage, and then they realized they had a worse dictator under Pyrrhus, so they asked for Carthage back.
Oh, so the people weren't Carthaginians, they were just being controlled by Carthage? Sounds like it.
You mean the people in Sicily?
Yeah,
Yeah, the people in Sicily were controlled by Carthage.
which is where the temple gets desecrated.
Right.
We'll see what that looks like.
So first they asked Pyrrhus to come and free them from Carthage, and then they realized they had a worse dictator under Pyrrhus, so they asked Carthage to come back. At the same time, Sicily is asking to return to Carthage. Pyrrhus receives a report that Rome has broken their treaty, because remember they had a treaty here, and is descending on Tarentum. He left his son in Tarentum, Pyrrhus did, left his son in Tarentum to watch over the city, and he receives a report that Rome is marching on it. So he's facing a battle with Rome that he can't avoid. So remember, his plan was, though, to go here and build a great navy and ship, come back down over here, get some of the Greek city-states, come up here and become king of Macedonia, and then come back to Rome and have it all. But he finds that Rome is coming down to march on Tarentum, and his son is in Tarentum. So seeing his control of Sicily weakened internally, he flees internally weakened because his people don't want him. He flees Sicily and returns to Tarentum just in time. Rome is descending and Carthage is attacking. He heads back to southern Italy and faces Rome at one final battle in 275, the Battle of Beneventum. So this is the last battle between Rome and Pyrrhus. It's a 6-year war with 3 battles between the north and the south, Rome and Pyrrhus. So you have a 6-year war, these battles between the Pyrrhic War between Rome and Pyrrhus. It ends in 275 BC with the last battles, which is Beneventum. Rome attacks the south, Pyrrhus, and this time it's a victory for Rome, and Pyrrhus is defeated. Why is he defeated? Once again, Pyrrhus faced Rome. Rome was on one side, Pyrrhus was on the other, and he also had his elephants. Behind the elephants, about 20 of the elephants, and then his army. So you've got Rome, their army, and then you've got Pyrrhus here with his army, and then you've got about 20 elephants in front of his army. The elephants charged at the Roman army. As the elephants charged, something caused them to change direction, and they turned around and charged back over Pyrrhus' own army. So the elephants of Pyrrhus defeated him. So they're charging, the elephants are charging on the army. Something causes them to turn around, and they go back over Pyrrhus' army. It's elephants that still decide the victory of the battle. But instead of helping Pyrrhus defeat Rome, they turn and change over his own troops, and then this loses the battle for Pyrrhus. So it's information war. We know that, right? So Putin has, I'm just thinking this out. Anybody help me? Putin has this information war, and his information turns around and turns back on him, right? The only real story of how that happened was that there was a younger elephant that was wounded, and his mother was part of this group. When she heard the cries of her wounded baby, she became wild and distracted and turned back to go to the baby elephant. When she turned, she leads all the elephants to turn and go towards Pyrrhus, and they went back over Pyrrhus' army. So it's going to be information war they're attacking each other with, right? The United States and Putin. An information war that's going back and forth. Pyrrhus is charging with his information war, but something turns the information back upon him and defeats him.
Maybe this baby means this G5 or whatever that Russia is. It's the baby of the internet.
What?
The G5 or how they call it. The extra power for
5G.
5G.
I was like, do you mean the G7? What are you talking about?
Okay.
She's talking about 5G.
That sounds like the baby, right?
No, that's
Sounds
not.
somebody young.
It's not internet. It's information war. So it's not.
Information, because they're doing this to get more information and to be more.
No, it has to be something like, oh, information has come out that Putin did this when he did that to that person, and he did this, and it caused this to happen.
It takes him down.
It's basically like really high level gossip.
his information turns back and bites him.
Yeah, so but that isn't that what Tess said? You play the game of information
It comes
war.
back to you
This
too,
is the risk that you know.
because it comes back to you as well.
Yeah. So every time he won, he also played his hand in these two wars with information war, because people saw what Putin was doing. Isn't that part of like a Pyrrhic victory where he loses a lot? You lose a lot of
Like when you see the agency and you expose the agency, you expose all the bots that are doing all the work on Facebook.
exactly, because they're catching on. The more he plays this, no one knew what Putin was doing, all this information war. The mass public had no idea what this was. But then 2016 happened and everyone saw what, that, I mean, he won. He won to get Trump in there, but all over the news, you had Russia, and it was in our elections. How did they do this? And it was exposing his tactics. He's trying again. He tried again. He did this year again with his information warfare, and he won again. But again, it exposed, like Tess pointed out, the other day, where he goes in and he, manages around with the spheres of influence. But every time he does that, he exposes what his tactics are.
Right. So Panium is 2021. The election's 2020.
Yeah.
So you think it's going to revolve then around the election, something more exposure to what he's doing?
I don't know.
Because it was revolving around the election in 2016.
I think something
But
is
Rafael-
going to happen with the election
Raffia,
again.
What'd you say?
Something is going to happen with the election again.
Raffia was also about the election, right? Because you had them looking into Biden.
Yeah, because
Well, it's about it's about the campaign
Yeah.
for the election. Yeah.
the impeachment and everything, people might not expect him to win again. But when it's going to happen, again,
Is that gonna? Yeah, maybe that has something to do with exposing Putin,
yeah,
because Trump's gonna win because of his.
Russia is going to be in everybody's.
Isn't Trump gonna win because of the help of Russia?
I don't know. See, that's the thing. I don't know how, because they expose their hands so much, that everyone right now should be carefully watching for Russia involvement.
But it's going to happen.
But
again,
that's-
and everybody's going to go through the roof.
And this is
But that
weakening him.
can't happen, because that would be another Russia win. So it can't be because of Russia. You can't have three King of the South wins.
No, but this is weakening him. That's what you started out saying, right? This is actually what's weakening him. It's the exposure to like the agency
Yeah,
and all the.
because-
Yeah, and those two
2021.
battles, those were battles.
Yeah.
This isn't a
But what's
battle.
weakening him now then? Somebody's got something in the chat, but I can't see it.
But it's 2021
Well,
when
he-
he's going to lose.
But he's in this story, he's not in contact with the King of the North. That's not what helps him lose. You know what I'm saying? Like, what's weakening him now is whatever he does in Sicily, which seems far away from what Rome is doing.
Can I say something?
Yes.
Okay, I guess that's, yeah. Oh yeah, Brother Jonathan put, there is misinformation that is being used the same as last election on the U.S. public. Conspiracy theories that fuel their fears. Possibly these backfire on Putin among his own public. Just a thought. I've had for a little while, but I don't know. Maybe the same conspiracy theories that get Trump elected again cause Putin to be weakened.
I know the one where you're saying that his own people are going to turn on him. That's what happened with Ptolemy Philopator in Egypt right before Panium. Is there was a revolt against him by the people. So that would make sense. And you've seen that increasing. You've had more and more people stand up against Putin in his own country, even if they're facing violence. So his people are rallying against him. The more he does this, the more angrier, people in his country get. And the more he puts people in jail for having, wanting to say the truth. People are getting more outraged. So he's losing his own people gradually as time goes on. And it has to be. So when Russia fell in '89, it was an internal thing. The people
Yes.
wanted it internally.
Yes.
So it has to be again.
Okay. So again, as with Heraclea and Asculum, and now with Beneventum, the victor is decided by the roll of elephants. And with the Battle of Beneventum, Pyrrhus leaves Italy. He flees immediately and goes back to Epirus, which takes us right back to where we began in 275 BC, is the end of the Pyrrhic War. 273 BC, there's a general or a king who has been following the reports of these battles between Rome and Pyrrhus because he's intimately connected to one of the players. This is General Ptolemy. This general is Ptolemy. He knows Pyrrhus very well. Pyrrhus has spent a lot of time in Egypt. He married Ptolemy's stepdaughter. They have very close and personal connections, and Ptolemy knows what a good general Pyrrhus is. Ptolemy hasn't been paying much attention to the rise of Rome, but over the 6-year battle of Pyrrhus, he watches over Rome's behavior. He saw how Rome swept down and took all of the south, and he recognizes that there is an important global power developing, and he can no longer ignore its rise. I'm going to turn on my phone so I can read it. So Christine says, will Putin's people and the world blame Putin for getting Trump elected? Christine is asking, will Putin's people and the world blame Putin for getting Trump elected?
Don't they already do that? Isn't it?
I don't know. She's talking about in 2020.
Oh.
I think she's talking about 2020. So
I don't know. See, that's the thing. I don't know if 2020 is going to look the same as it has been between Trump and Putin so far, because it's changing. The dynamic right now, what's going to happen now to Putin between King of the North and King of the South is going to be changing. So if you want to say, well, he helped him win this election, he helped him win this, it's not, I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen with the election.
Yeah, Susan brings up this point, because what I was thinking with what happened in Iran, or it was actually Iraq, in Baghdad, that this is actually emboldening Trump as well. I don't know how this plays, how it plays out, but it's emboldening him. And back to that video I watched a while back, a couple weeks ago on Hitler and Stalin, where it talks about Hitler getting his first taste of death. Recognizing this power that you have, it's one thing to have the power that he has to run this nation, but this power that you have to, it makes me think about when the centurion, and I don't want to get the story wrong, I might have the wrong story, but the centurion that comes and he has faith in Christ, he's recognizing, I don't want to say this backwards, he's recognizing that when you give an order that people go, is it Christ that says it to the centurion or the centurion says it to Christ? But the centurion knows that he can just tell people, and on his word,
says it to Christ.
Yeah, and on his word, people do stuff. And so, yeah, okay. So Trump is coming into this new role as president by experience. I'm not saying that he doesn't know this, but by experience now, he's experiencing what it's like to be able to, at his call, people go get killed. People respond and go get, this has got to be changing his psyche leading up to.
Can I add something? You know what? That same, I tagged you on Facebook. I don't know if you got it, but last night he was in front of, I think it was in Florida, I'm thinking, in a evangelical rally, and he was talking about, all that fluffy religious stuff that he thinks is so great, after he just assassinated somebody.
Right.
He didn't even bat an eyelash. Like, it was just so disgusting, shameful.
But that's what they want. They want a warrior king.
Yeah, I started to watch that, but then the sun was going down. I turned it off, and I think I posted it in the WhatsApp. But yeah, because it was like an hour and a half long, and I want to go back and watch it if I can. But there's so many videos to watch; it's hard to watch that stuff. But But yeah, they're all praying over him, and and he's loving it. He's soaking it all up. I watched the part where they did before the speech, where all the prayers, two or three of them prayed for him. And if you watch his face and watch his expressions, if you get a chance to go back and watch it, and he's hearing these prayers being said for him and lifting him up and lifting up. I don't remember the specifics, but watch his expressions on his face. This has to be changing him, and it's shaping him to. They are playing a huge role in causing him to believe that he can do whatever he wants. So in 273, Ptolemy, or Egypt, sends ambassadors to Rome. The first offer of a diplomatic relationship. So 273 now, because remember that Ptolemy now is recognizing Rome on the scene. So Egypt, Ptolemy, sends ambassadors to Rome. A.T. Jones tells us that the following year, in 272 BC, Rome returned that favor, and Rome sent ambassadors to Egypt, headed by Fabius.
Can you hear me? Can I say something?
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to say that a lot of people, you know how Fox and Friends communicate to Trump directly through their show? A lot of people are taking on that method of reaching out to Trump, because I was watching something on the news, I can't remember, and there was this person, I can't remember the situation right now in my head, but there was this person saying that we're not going to vote for you again if you don't do this. It was like a threat to Donald Trump. And one of those commercial type, you know, what you call those, information videos or campaign videos. Yeah, so I just want to put that out there, that a lot of people are using the media to really communicate to Trump, to tell them what they want and talk to him directly through those types of media platforms.
Yeah.
So I thought that was interesting. Sorry.
No, that's fine. That's fine. So Rome sends ambassadors to Egypt, headed by Fabius Maximus Georgius, and his name means the maximum flood. Trump crossed the line with the assassination of the Iran general. He will only find it easier to do worse. Yep, that's what I believe too. He doesn't harbor the character that exercises restraint. With great power comes great responsibility. He's too proud to not want to use the American military in an all-out war. So maximum flood. Two other things happened this year. In 275 BC, Pyrrhus is defeated, but he's not killed. In 272 BC, Pyrrhus is down in Greece and fighting a separate campaign in the city. He makes some poor choices while he's fighting. His son is killed, and he's emotional over it, and he continues to make worse decisions. This is interesting because this is actually what we're watching with. Well, Pyrrhus is Putin. I got to keep that in my head because we're seeing dynamics go on between Trump and Putin, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But there's something that happens when you allow yourself to get too lifted up. It's a gradual thing, but once you hit a certain point, no more. And it's anyway, so now he can't make proper decisions, if I'm understanding correctly. So Putin is going to come to a place where he can't make right decisions, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Can't function, can't make good decisions. So let's see. He's making worse decisions. He ends up in the streets in this city fighting in the tight alleyways with his whole army, fighting a hand-to-hand combat with his enemy. He's disconnected. He's made poor decisions by bringing his army and elephants into the middle of the city. It was an effort to take a Greek city that went completely wrong. As he is fighting hand-to-hand with his soldier, he's fighting in this tight street. In a window above, the mother of the soldier who is fighting with Pyrrhus is watching. She leans out the window and takes roof tiles and hurls them at Pyrrhus, who is on his horse. One of the tiles hits him on the head, and it stuns him, and he falls off the horse, and he is killed by the soldier and by the fall and by the soldier. And so 272 Pyrrhus is killed. So we know that to not necessarily mean Putin, but it means Russia. So something along in that is going to help us understand what's going to happen to Russia,
So
correct?
who is the one?
It's the king and the kingdom,
King and the kingdom.
because that's what happened in '89 also.
But it doesn't mean necessarily a literal death, right?
No. It could just mean he loses power, so.
Yeah, that's
Well, because the whole thing of the war is, and I had it on that sheet that I printed out for everybody, the whole thing of the war is, of Rafia is proxy wars, information war, and spheres of influence. So he loses his spheres of influence. So right now he's on this big win because he has all these spheres of influence, but his spheres of influence are not, other than China being, isn't China, maybe you help me better out here, but like Africa, that's not a wealthy sphere of influence, right? But he doesn't have a lot of support. That's what I've been reading in a lot of the articles, that he doesn't have a lot of financial, he's a lot of financial support.
From what she was saying, he is basically bringing together a ragtag crew of reach. I don't say it that way, but people who don't want, basically leaders who don't care about what their people in their country want, and they're doing whatever they want. And no one, NATO, UN, EU, no one wants to deal with those people. No one will make any agreements. So they're like these solo flyers, and Putin's like, I'll just gather you to myself. And that's how now he's a global player. But the only
You
one.
can't win with those ones.
No, and so the only one that's really substantial is China. And Trump's been alienating that relationship with China. So Putin's like, oh, you're gonna, all right, well, he's gonna be my buddy now. And so,
So
which
nobody
is a smart move, but if you can maintain it.
So on the board game of Risk, he chose weak, his spheres of influence may be great geographically, if that's the way to look at it, but financially and strength-wise and mentality, his spheres of influence, it's like having a useless army.
Yeah, they have enough power to be a thorn in the side of US, UN, everyone, right? Because they
A thorn in the side, but not destroy.
yeah, not a, oh, I'm gonna overthrow you kind of power. Because the whole point was no one took Russia seriously as a global contending power. And to be able to be a global contending power, you have to be involved in governments all over the globe. That's what makes you global. That's what makes it a bilateral business, right? It's not just the United States and all these countries. Now Russia has this kind of scope as well. Oh, now we can look at Russia. So it's not like, oh, now they're all the way up on the level of the US. It's just like, oh, now we can consider them a global player because they have their foot in the door in different governments all over the world. They have deals and treaties, whatever you want. But it doesn't mean that it's strong agreements. They're enough to be annoying and irritating because they're strategic in how they're placed, but they're not, they're not that.
So since
because he doesn't have the UN, and there's still NATO, and there's still the EU who's not happy with him, and the US, and all those are for the most part in agreement.
He doesn't have the big power players.
Yeah.
So going back to 1989, if I remember right from the studies that we did from Brazil, trying to remember which one it was, but he resented what happened to the USSR. And so he's trying to rebuild what it once was, right?
Yeah.
But he doesn't have the power players in his pocket. He has weak spheres of influence. Is that the best way to say that?
Yeah, there's still ones that the US wants, but.
So we already discussed this in Acts 27, what the city was that he was called, what he was killed in. It was called Argos, and Argos is named after the Argolic plain where they grew all their grain. Its name, Argos, is a reference to the color of the grain at harvest time, which is white. There's another story we can link to 272 BC. In 275 BC, Pyrrhus is defeated. Beneventum, he's defeated Panium, Midnight Cry. Rome has control over the south, but Tarentum did not surrender so easily, and they hold out under siege. From 275 to 272 BC, Rome is besieging the city of Tarentum, the last city they have to take to have total control of the south. And in 272 BC, Tarentum surrenders, and Tarentum falls, and Rome takes the last city of the south. we'll come back to this concept because Beneventum, we already drew conclusions that Beneventum is a reference to what we call Panium. 272 becomes a symbol of the Sunday law. We call these waymarks Panium and Sunday law being shipwreck in the story of Acts 27. So this is Sunday law here, and we know that this is Panium. We're going to review this history again from a different perspective in another study. But what we can begin to see is that the defeat of the king of the south is a process. Everyone knows who won in 275 BC. Egypt is already recognizing it, but it's still a process. It begins in 275 BC and begins to fall till it's completely destroyed in 272 BC. And we'll discuss what it looks like. In the story of Pyrrhus, we're going to bring in other witnesses to show this process. This is the story of Pyrrhus from 303 BC, when he begins to be involved in world politics, to 272 BC, where he dies. So I don't have 303 still on here, but 303 was just before Ipsus. Ipsus is then 303, I think was 2014. Ipsus is 2016. And so that's where Pyrrhus becomes involved in 303 and all the way till here to his death. So in the story of Pyrrhus, we're going to bring in other witnesses. Let's see, this is the story of Pyrrhus from 303 BC when he begins to be involved in world politics to 272 where he dies. So we have divided his life into two parts, Macedonia and Italy. Macedonia ends a Cold War up in here. We're going to have a bigger chart here showing more here in just a minute. So Macedonia ends in the Cold War, and it also begins a second phase. It's changing its location. So when we come to the Pyrrhic War history, we are already referencing the battles of Raphia and Panium. So this 285 right here, ending of this Cold War, is where the transition is from Macedonia to Italy. Yep. So if you're looking at that, what would Macedonia be? If Macedonia is the first part and Italy is the second part, we know that Italy is our history, current. Macedonia takes you back to World War II. And I don't have applications on here, but this one just got too long to stretch it all out. So if everybody can I just kind of brought some of it down here and kept it going. But 285 is, again, 285 is where it transitions from World War II to World War III. Everybody understand that? Okay. So we want to begin to consider is what this teaches us in application. Pyrrhus comes in two histories, and that's the king of the south. So when we come into our history and we talk about Panium, who is the king of the south, we know that that's Russia, and Russia also has Putin as the king. Daniel 2 gives us an important principle, a Bible rule. The rule is about a king and a kingdom. When Daniel tells Nebuchadnezzar the meaning of the statue, he points to the head of gold. And what does he say to Nebuchadnezzar? He says that that head of gold is you. It's Nebuchadnezzar as an individual. It's not just a kingdom, but it's also a person. We did the same thing with Greece. It's Greece, but who is it? It's Alexander. When you come into the history of a kingdom, you come to a history that's connected to a prominent king, and the symbology is connected. So this is the history of Putin and Russia, the king of the south in our time. Who is the first history speaking of when we come to the Alpha? We're going to trace the kings of Epirus. Pyrrhus was the most prominent king, and he covers all of our history. But the first king marked in that history is Admetus, and Pyrrhus is the 10th. So the first one is Admetus, and Pyrrhus is the 10th. Pyrrhus became king. He faced some internal problems, and he was removed from that leadership. Someone else became king, Neoptolemus II. Pyrrhus forced him to co-rule. So Pyrrhus is removed, and Neoptolemus comes in, and there's a co-rule. So there was a time when you had two kings of Epirus, Pyrrhus and Neoptolemus the second. Pyrrhus,
You don't have to pronounce the P.
think so what is it, Neoptolemus? You say it.
Highlighted on the oh yeah, Neoptolemus. Neoptolemus.
Neoptolemus, okay, well, I'll try, you guys.
Because it's just a sound. It ends up being silent.
So,
Neoptolemus.
so Pyrrhus has him killed, and he returned as the sole king of the kingdom. So Pyrrhus is ruling. He's removed, and he puts a co-rule. There's a co-ruler here where they rule together. He has this guy killed, and then Pyrrhus rules again.
This
So if we are going to talk about Pyrrhus and say that he is Vladimir Putin, Putin was the president for 2 terms, 2000 2008, 4 2-year terms. Under the Russian Constitution, he cannot run for a 3rd consecutive year. So Putin pretends to step down and Medvedev becomes president. But was he ruling alone? Medvedev made Putin his prime minister, and they did not try to hide the fact that they were co-ruling. But Medvedev was only president for 1 full term. And in 2011, he announced he would not be running for re-election. He dutifully stepped aside, and Vladimir Putin could run a 3rd term because it wasn't consecutive. So this is how Vladimir Putin retained hold of power without breaking the Russian Constitution, which says you can only rule 2 consecutive terms in the same, and the same as in, she worded this way, but in America you can only run 2 terms. It didn't have anything to do with being consecutive. But he's managed to control the country by using some clever tactics since 1999, which has been 20 years. So when we discuss Putin, we are saying that he is the 10th, so who is the first? And I have the answer there.
Oh, Lenin.
Huh?
Lenin?
Stalin.
Stalin? Lenin.
Pyrrhus is Putin, Putin is
Oh
Stalin.
yeah, because Lenin gave it to. Okay.
Lenin gives it to Stalin, and we're going to show that.
Okay.
Of the Soviet Union. So Lenin was there, but it was before they were the Soviet Union, is that correct?
Lenin made the Soviet Union.
So why did she put him as first? I don't remember. You know, I think I do remember, and maybe we're going to read it. She talks about it being all these revolutions that were taking place. So it's after some of these revolutions that were taking place, if I remember right, where she marks it. I don't know if anybody has any remembrance of that.
Because it was Lenin who overthrew it was the Bolshevik Revolution,
Right.
who overthrew the king of Russia. And now you
The
have,
Tsar, right?
yeah, the Tsar. And now you had Lenin and Trotsky. Yeah, Trotsky, I think it was. Together, they were bringing about the socialism. That's what the whole point was, Marxism. Their belief was in Marxism, so they're trying to bring about socialism.
I think if I remember from the other studies, the reason she marked Stalin at the beginning was because of all the revolutions that were taking place prior to.
Okay.
I don't know if I can understand that. Maybe somebody has some insight to that, but I remember that being part of it. Why does she mark it with Stalin?
I don't remember that study well, so I don't know.
So looking at Pyrrhus again, we've already said that he became king at a young age. Why was he king so young? What we find in that history is that their nation had a set of peculiar problems. His father had been king of cities, but he lost the support of his own people, and he was removed in a political coup. And another king took the throne, a rival, Neoptolemus. Okay, so you've got Admetus, you've got Acetes, who's still overtaken in a coup, and then now you have Neoptolemus, who's actually a relative of this one here. This doesn't last long. Acetes is returned to the throne, and Neoptolemus is removed. But because of this coup, Acetes is so weakened that he is killed in this history by Cassander. Cassander does not like the leadership of Acetes, so he invades Epirus and has him killed. When he is killed, his brother, Pyrrhus's uncle, takes the throne, Alcides II. He's the oldest brother of Acetes. He should have had the throne in the beginning because he is the oldest brother. The reason he is overlooked is because he's very unpopular and is known for his lack of self-control. particularly his temper. The historians call it an ungovernable temper. So you've got Admetus following him as Acetes. He's taken over in a coup. Neoptolemus is now on the throne. Acetes comes back, but he's weakened. And then next would be Alcides, which was, did it say uncle? Pyrrhus's uncle takes the throne. And he would have had the throne back here, but except for the fact that he had a lack of self-control, an ungovernable temper. Okay. So the characteristics do become key. Some of us, I think, already know that. We brought that down into the history that led us to Putin. Who we should remind ourselves when he became president was comparatively young, incredibly inexperienced, unlike any president they had before. And this kind of threw me off, and I went back and reviewed the video to try to figure out what this is what she said. But she says that unlike any other president they had before until the leadership of Stalin. So to me, she was talking about Putin, and Stalin was way back here. So I'm not real sure on what she said here, but I'll read it again. We brought that down into the history that led us to Putin, who we should remind ourselves when he became president was comparatively young, incredibly inexperienced, unlike any president they had before until the leadership of Stalin. So she's talking about Putin being incredibly inexperienced, unlike any other leader they had until Stalin.
It sounds like she's saying there's never been such a young and experienced president except for back when Stalin was around.
Okay, because it sounded like she would be suggesting that Stalin would be after.
Yeah, I think the words got finagled around a little bit, but I'm pretty sure. So Stalin, Mom, do you remember how young Stalin was when he went to? Let's do the googly.
So we find Gorbachev, who was removed in a political coup. So you have Stalin here, and you have Gorbachev, who's removed in a political coup. And that placed a rival, Yanayev, is that how you say that one?
Where are you?
Yanayev, as leading in this stage of what is the Soviet Union, because this is the Soviet period of time of the USSR. Gorbachev is taken out in a coup. Yanayev is placed in his place. He takes power.
Yanayev.
Huh?
Yanayev. Yeah.
Takes power, but not for long, because Gorbachev was able to come back. He survives the coup and retakes power. So Gorbachev comes back here. But he has been so weakened as well by what happened in this history that he cannot hold on to the government. He steps down, and it is the end of the Soviet Union because he was so weakened. So this is the end of the Soviet Union here. Boris Yeltsin took power. What was Boris Yeltsin's problem? He had no self-control, in particular with alcohol and the corruptions in his government. His lack of self-control has a side effect with his health as it begins to fail. Because of these issues, he loses the respect of the people and is forced to step down, making way for Putin. So we can see these histories paralleling. When Gorbachev stepped down, that was the end of the USSR. So you have this a coup here. You have the first Admetus, the first Stalin. Then you have Acetus. You have Gorbachev. You have them taken out in a coup, each of them. Then they're replaced by a rival. And then the previous one comes back from the coup, but is severely weakened. You have Gorbachev who comes back severely weakened, and this makes the end of the USSR. When you go back to the history leading up to Stalin, back here, when Tsar Nicholas was removed, it was the end of the monarchy. So instead of Tsar Nicholas, Lenin takes power. Why didn't Lenin stay in power? He also had health issues, and he had a series of strokes. Were you going to say something? Okay. So Lenin has health issues as well. There's Victoria. So we can parallel the rise of Putin that placed him in power as young and inexperienced with the rise of Pyrrhus, who came in young and inexperienced. We can create this structure, a straight reference from Pyrrhus to Putin. So you've got this Pyrrhus to Putin link where you can place them on the line together, Pyrrhus to Putin. So we can also see it in the line from the rise of Stalin to the rise of Putin on our line. So you see the rise of Stalin, and then you have the rise of Putin. So there's a connection, a direct connection from Pyrrhus to Putin, and there's a direct connection from Putin to Stalin. Gorbachev to Yeltsin, Tsar Nicholas is the end of the monarchy. Gorbachev is the end of the USSR. What?
You did this. What did you want?
She tapped me and I just was waving, making sure she knew I knew you were here.
I know.
So, so Tsar Nicholas is the end of the monarchy. Gorbachev is the end of the USSR. So you've got this end of the monarchy here, and then you have Gorbachev being the end of the monarchy. Lenin takes power, but he has problems with his health, and he places Stalin in his position. So Lenin places Stalin in his position, but Lenin has health issues. Stalin is placed in the position of general secretary, which he holds to his death by Lenin. Vladimir Putin is placed in his position, first as a prime minister and then as a president, directly by Boris Yeltsin. Boris Yeltsin has a problem with his health due to lack of self-control, particularly in relation to alcohol. So Yeltsin puts Putin on the throne. Yeltsin has a health issue that puts Putin on the throne. Lenin has a health issue that puts Stalin on the throne. We've created two structures, and we can see that Pyrrhus is Putin. They are representative of each other. And that explains the history in our Italy line. We can also see that Putin is typified by Stalin. So Pyrrhus equals Putin, and Putin equals Stalin. We can take the history of Pyrrhus as we see it in Italy, and it represents Putin. So does everybody understand that? We can take the history of Pyrrhus in Italy, the battles that took place, and that's where you have Asculum. Why am I missing one? What's before Asculum? No, that's right, Asculum. Heraclea, thank you. Heraclea, Asculum, and Beneventum. Those are the Pyrrhus in Italy battles that line up with Putin. But if Pyrrhus equals Putin and Putin equals Stalin, who is Pyrrhus also going to tell us about? He's going to tell us about Stalin, because remember, Pyrrhus comes in two parts. Because this is the Alpha and Omega, the two histories of the King of the South. The King of the South under Stalin and the King of the South under Putin. So when we come to the beginning history, whose history are we to look into? Stalin, and that takes us into the world wars, which Elder Parmenter had been introducing and describing. So they should already be familiar terms. We should already be aware of how we are studying them and the conclusions we're coming to about them. So Stalin represents Pyrrhus in his Macedonian wars, in his the early part of his wars, and then Putin represents the line that covers Pyrrhus in Italy with Heraclea, Asculum, and Beneventum. So Stalin and Putin both face war with the King of the North. Two histories of Pyrrhus's life equals the two histories of the King of the South. So there's an alpha and an omega history. Pyrrhus equals Putin, and Putin equals Stalin. So if A equals B and B equals C, what is A? A equals C. So if everybody kind of followed that, I hope. Any questions? Guess you're all okay. So two histories for the King of the South show us the two histories of the King of the South in our time. So we're looking at the King of the South, the USSR, not from its end. We want to go back to the very beginning where the King of the South becomes involved in world affairs. 1917 was the Russian Revolution, where Russia turned into a communist power, first under Lenin and then transitioning to under Stalin. It's engulfed in civil war until around 1922, 5 years later. And then it takes years from 1922 to 29 for Stalin to take over the USSR as a dictatorship. He wasn't the only communist that was influential. You may have heard of Trotsky, which Adriana just mentioned, and other factions vying for power that were really Stalin's first internal enemies. Even though the USSR has transitioned into this communist power from 1917 to 1929, it's distracted by internal issues. First of all, the Civil War, then Trotsky, and Stalin tries to take over the country. In 1929, at Stalin's 50th birthday, he begins in more clear fashion to build a cult of personality, and he puts down his last government rivals. So from 1929, Stalin is in stronger position to now start pushing his ideology worldwide. So that is a more detailed, I guess, explanation of what we were talking about before. But because Russia was in a lot of internal strife and revolutions that were taking place and internal problems over powers, she's marking Stalin as the first once he gets to this place. So we also know 1929 for other events. There was the economic crash that began the Great Depression. And a side effect of that financial crash was that it enabled the rise of Hitler. So when the market collapsed inside Germany, life became much more difficult and people became much more desperate and desperate for alternatives. And the language of the populist leader like Adolf Hitler became much more appealing to them. And you can trace his election wins from 1929 and see how quickly that escalated. Across Europe from 1917, particularly escalating from 1917 up to World War II, much of Europe becomes divided into two sides, and countries are deciding which side they're going to stand with. The division that begins off quietly is between two modes of government, fascism and communism. The countries are deciding on which side that they'll stand. So across Europe, many of the countries are choosing one of these forms of government they want to be. Under fascism, you can mark Italy. Under Mussolini, you can have Germany as it rises up under Hitler. So fascism, you have Mussolini, you have Hitler, and we'll get to him in a second. Under communism, you have the Soviet Union and Stalin. And he is looking at these fascist governments as a threat because he sees these powerful countries are turning fascist coming into an alliance. He sees that alliance as a threat. He wants to stem that flow by stopping more of Europe from turning fascist. Kind of interesting when you think about it, because if you get one fascist country, another fascist country, and another fascist country, and then they all come together, become too powerful. Is that the way to describe that? They become too powerful, and he doesn't want them.
Wait, say that one more time. I'm so sorry.
Well, you know, if you had several countries that are fascist, and those several countries all come together and make one big fascist state, you become more powerful, right?
Right.
Just thinking out loud, I guess.
No, but you're right on that, because I mean, if everybody's in unity and they're all thinking the same thing, you know,
They're going to be stronger.
exactly.
So in the next country having an internal struggle of which form of government.
Real quick, so those countries though, from what I can tell you, the ones that were of the same ideology would trade. So they were able to have trade with each other, trade partners and economic stuff, but they would not do that with the other ideology.
What are you
So-
saying?
Like trade goods.
It leaves one
No,
out,
no,
one
I don't.
out, not being a power player in
So
the
if all
trade.
the countries
Hold on,
become that
sister.
ideology and you can't trade with them, now you're weakened.
I didn't follow you when you were talking about.
So Romania was communist and Russia was communist, and so
Right.
they were able to trade.
Okay,
Also Saddam Hussein was of the same.
I know, but what about the other ideology?
They don't trade with that.
I know,
Yeah.
but where did that come in from? Where did you bring that in the conversation? Was that just a note you were bringing in, or where?
Because Elaine is saying they become stronger.
Uh-huh,
This is one of the ways.
okay, because they're trading amongst each other.
Yeah, economics.
Yeah,
Okay,
because it's economics that makes them more powerful.
Right.
okay,
Because when you're communist, you look at what's happening with North Korea. They're the only country like that. People, they don't have enough food. They don't have enough stuff to make houses with. They're dying. They're falling apart because they can't trade, we can get more resources in.
I get where you're coming
Yeah.
from with that. Like, no, I didn't disagree or anything. I'm just
She
wondering
didn't understand.
where was that coming from? So I follow your thought in doing that.
Yeah. That was a huge issue because trade, that's how they brought down Russia, was with economic sanctions. When you had the Berlin Wall go up, there was no that was a big issue for all the countries in Europe. And you still have that issue today with resources, with like oil. So Russia can control Ukraine. They turn the tap off in the winter and they're dying of cold. So they won't have to do what Russia says if they want to be warm in the winter. That's why they're trying to get, oil from America to Europe to free them from Russia bondage. So it's very,
So I have a question with that. Then that means, is that part of the way that Russia kind of crumbles in the sense because they don't have, they won't have that economic trade. You know what I'm saying?
That's what happened in
They
89.
become so haughty, so like in his mind a superpower that we have so control over, these things that they forget that it's through those spheres of influence that they even have the power that they have. So in that control and in losing those spheres of influence, they have no economic trade. They have no power through which they can stabilize their country because they're all leaving.
right. So if you're Russia and you lose the Middle East, you lose those pipelines that you deviated from there to Europe to control Europe with. So that's in '89, the US used economic sanctions and stuff on their spheres of influence to destroy them then, and it's gonna happen again.
Yeah.
You lose your spheres of influence, you lose those trading partners, you lose
Right.
that,
Yeah, John has on here that North Korea's trade has been restricted by sanctions. I don't think it's because they didn't want trade.
At the beginning, it wasn't, I don't think it was just sanctions, because they're not gonna trade with anyone who's not of their ideology. Now it is, no one wants to trade with them now after they see what they've done.
But the
Back
one who
in the
has
day,
the
they
power,
used to, yeah.
the one who has the power gets to put the sanctions out. Is
Yes.
it? So if these fascist countries all get together and they do their trade, they have the power, the economic power, and they can put sanctions on the weaker ones.
Exactly.
Okay.
He says they have had heavy sanctions since the original Korean War decades ago.
But they had trading partners back then because China was communist. You know what I'm saying? They had sanctions from the other ideology, but when there were still other people who had the same ideology they did, they still had people to trade with and survive. China doesn't, does China still help them? Because they're still communist too, isn't it?
I'm pretty sure they are.
Yeah, maybe I'm not 100% clear on that. I don't know. I want to look into that though.
So under communism, you have USSR under Stalin, and he's looking at these fascist governments as a threat because he sees these powerful countries are turning fascist, coming into an alliance, which is basically what we were just talking about. They're all coming together. They're individual themselves, but they're coming into an alliance, and it built them into a greater economic strength. He sees that alliance as a threat. He wants to stem that flow by stopping more of Europe from turning fascist. And the next country having an internal struggle of which form of government it will be is Spain. So Spain is now having an internal struggle on whether or not they're going to be fascist or communist. And there is a Spanish Civil War beginning, just like we're talking here about the King of the South, but what you're seeing in the United States right now, you're seeing a internal civil war over which form of government do you want? Okay, so
No, it just makes me smile because I see how you're monitoring the chat.
you were here to monitor it for
I
me.
know.
And she wasn't keeping up on it, so, but it keeps going off because I don't know how to operate my phone. So, so let's see. So the next country was Spain. So Spain's having an internal civil war, the Spanish Civil War, over which side they're going to be, whether or not they want. You got some that want to be fascist and some that want to be communist. So the beginning of the history of 1929, it ends in 1939. So it's a 10-year civil war. And the Spanish Civil War is a struggle between fascism and communism, particularly between the USSR and Germany. They call it a practice match, like you would have in sport, a practice match before you have the major match. And they say that this Spanish Civil War was the practice match before World War II. and it's a proxy war between Germany and the USSR, between Hitler and Stalin. So you've got this proxy war, each of them trying to get Spain to be either fascist or try to get Spain to be communist here. And let's see, and the men you would identify with Spain in this country is the man you would identify as General Franco. In 1939, General Franco wins.
Can I ask a question?
Uh-huh.
Sorry. So does America win because they're spreading democracy, right? So you have the fascist ideology, and then you have communism ideology, and then you have democracy. Well, it's supposed to be constitutional republic, but everybody's calling it democracy. So I'm just gonna say what they say. So democracy, is their ideology beating all? You get what I'm saying? Because everybody wants democracy in their country. This is a war. If we think about it, it's almost crazy because it almost is a proxy war over the mind as well, because it's based off of your ideology. If you believe in communism, if you believe in democracy, if you believe in fascism, it's pretty interesting how there's this battle over the mind over if you're going to stand for this, and that's why you have so many revolutions, because it is a battle over ideology and what you're standing for. If you don't believe the way your government is running, you're going to rebel against it. And that's where all these revolutions break out. But if these people don't have an understanding of what democracy looks like or what fascism looks like, that's when you have people invading. Exactly. You have people invading into those countries saying, this is what our country is all about. Do you want to have this in yours? Do you want to be about this? And people are like, yeah. And then you have those revolutions going crazy, So I'm just wondering if that's a way that they're fighting too, through ideology. Because if you're thinking about it, communism died. Well, it's still a type of ideology still going in China and all those other countries that keep, follow that. But then you have democracy that's like standing super strong. I don't even hear about fascism, but I do now, but I do believe there's people that believe in that. But I'm just saying that,
That's what they call the Republican.
Isn't it nationalism now? Fascism is nationalism, isn't it?
Or maybe somebody else can help you better understand that. But yeah, that's what they call, Susan says Rome was fascist. So, but that's basically what the ideology is behind the Republican Party is, from what I'm understanding. What if it's a different form of fascism? I don't know. But that's what they're called. Nationalism, fascism.
Is that the same thing? Nationalism.
Maybe somebody else knows the answer to that.
Yeah. But I don't know.
But it is internally, that's what the United States is battling over too.
Yeah.
Well, I guess communism, because socialism.
But also,
socialism and communism are different though, right?
They are different. No, I think
you said it before, but I don't
They're
remember.
mostly the same. There are small differences.
Yeah. That's what I was saying.
But so back in North Korea's history, when it first got split and everything happened after World War II, they were communist, China was communist, and Russia was communist, but there was some differences, like you just said, between Russia and China's communism, right? There's some ideological differences. North Korea chose China, and to this day, that's their number one trading partner, and Russia stopped trading with them. So the moment and then the US also stopped trading with them, and it just everything was cut off, and sanctions started. But it's been getting a little bit better recently, but the moment you choose an ideology, that restricts you now, because the world doesn't want to economically commune with you. But they always had strict, it's lifting up a little bit recently though. I think people are trying to reintegrate North Korea.
But that's the ideology, right? Communism, fascism, democracy, or republic, or all of those different ideologies are what a government stands for. That's what they're fighting for in each country to keep, right? Mm-hmm. Interesting.
Sister Jackie, do you want to make your comment?
Yes, I was just listening to a recent study by Tess, and she's comparing Putin's rise to dictatorship along with, on the opposite end, of course, Trump. And she said that the last horn, of course, is Republic, or the Republicans, and that Trump, by his behavior and actions, has cut off that horn. So we're in a dictatorship already,
Right,
and it's going to continue to progress.
right.
So,
People
yeah,
don't,
and I think we know that. And, you know, she gave a lot of comparisons between the rise of Putin and his being against the press and anyone who went against him. He either fired or got rid of, and this is exactly the pattern that Trump is going in. And we can see it in the impeachment with the Republicans all standing on his side.
Right.
I have, oh, sorry.
If you don't stand on his side, it's death.
I have a just comment on
To your
that
career.
because it makes me think that we know that Trump is a dictator, you know, and is becoming more manifested, you know, visible as time progresses. But I'm just saying that isn't it kind of term? Well, I guess what I'm learning, you know, is also referred to as oligarchy, right? That it's where you have one person, but you have that few, or I mean the what you call it, ruled by few, right? Oligarchy, and it is kind of true in that sense that Trump and the Republican Party, or those people standing behind him, you know, they're backing him up, and it's kind of more of an oligarchy instead of I mean, I think it's all within that dictatorship oligarchy. I'm just putting that out there because I was a little bit not necessarily confused, but in the real sense of terms, when you understand oligarchy and what that is, that's actually what it really is, you know, because he is a dictator in his own right, in his own person. But at the same time, there's that elite group that's backing him up that actually helps him exude that power. So, so it is more of an oligarchy, but I don't know. I'm just putting that out there.
They get people to follow you, and then they give you money. So it is them that are telling you what to do as well.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's like you might have the money, but you don't have the influence. So you find somebody that has the ability, the skill, the tact, whatever it is that your money can get behind, and they can be your voice. So he's their puppet to some extent.
But prophetically in our time period, it's not just Republicans, it's religious ones.
Yeah,
And
right.
so it's the rich religious people that are controlling it for it to be church and state.
Right.
Right.
Well, that's what Susan put in here. The U.S. flag wrapped in religion would be fascist. People think they have a choice, but they do not realize their choice is being manipulated. So even though they believe they still have a free democracy, they really don't, because the Republican form of government is broken.
Amen. Now that is true captivity. When you think that
You're free
and you're not, that you're making.
I mean, if you were sitting in jail and there's bars all around you,
Yeah.
you get that you're in captivity.
Yeah, exactly.
But you have no bars around you. Wow, is that what that city is? Where is that? Never mind. Let's think about that. The
But
place without walls.
if you have a group or a person, it's same dictatorship as versus the people choosing and leading, because this is what America is people.
Well, their votes. America gets their democracy, well, part of their democracy through their consent to the government, and that they vote in who they want to be in office to represent them. But if you have Cambridge Analytica and people influencing your vote, then you're not choosing who you really want to vote for because your mind is manipulated.
Yeah.
We'll talk to you later, Sister Ellie. Yeah, so anyway, good study. Good study. So we're almost finished with this page. So you got Spain going on, trying to decide which way to go. The fascist side is supported by Hitler and Mussolini, and the communist side is supported by Stalin. General Franco is fascist and he wins and Spain becomes fascist. So you can see in that history that there's a division between Germany and the USSR that's already developed. So Germany and USSR, you can already see that they're enemies. And it's obvious from the Spanish Civil War, which ends April 1st, 1939. So the world is shocked and amazed when just a few months later, in 1939, August 23, these two natural enemies enter into an alliance. This is an alliance between these two powers who just fought each other in a proxy war. So in the Spanish Civil War, they're fighting against each other in a proxy war, which ends on the April 1st, 1939. Spain chooses fascism, and now they're going to enter into these two enemies that fought against each other are now going to enter into an alliance. This alliance between these two powers who just fought each other in a proxy war, natural great enemies, and they go into an alliance known as the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. Why would Hitler want an alliance with the USSR? In the history of World War I, in which Hitler was a soldier, Germany faced a particular problem that the other countries did not have. And it's one of the major reasons why Germany was unsuccessful in those histories. And that issue relates to its location. When a country waged war, it makes sense to send your army to the front line. And the enemy sends their army to the front line, and then your two armies fight. So you've got both of them on their front line fighting. But Germany has a particular problem, and that is its location. When fighting its enemies in World War I against England, France, and USSR, its main enemies are on the opposite sides of the country. And it had to fight a war on two different fronts. And as that invasion was successful and his army is spread out, and its army got further and further divided until you had two fronts further and further apart, which means you're harming your manpower and your resources. For France to fight Germany, all it needed was one front. The USSR needed only one front. But Germany is so vulnerable because of its central location. And this is the history of World War I, where Germany was defeated partly because of this vulnerable location where France and England fought against him. So you've got Germany that's got enemies on the west and enemies on the east. And he's trying to fight a war on both fronts. But those on the west, they have one front, and that's up against Germany. The USSR have one front. So Germany cannot sustain himself, and he loses in that battle. Hitler well knows he is entering into World War II because what he wants is Poland. He wants to take Poland, and he has already been told that if you attack Poland, then you're going to face war with Britain and France. Both of them had assured Poland, Britain and France both of them had assured Poland, Britain and France have both told Poland that if Germany invades you, we will go to war with them. So Britain and France are going to help Poland if he attacks Poland. So Hitler knows that if he wants Poland, so he knows he's about to go to war with Britain and France. He's going to face war on the Western Front, and he's just come out of the history of World War I where he fought, and he knows that if he is to start another war on two fronts, there's no hope of victory. He knows that his enemy is on the Eastern Front just waiting for him to be weak, and Stalin is going to attack him. So he cannot fight war on the West, with the West and the East at the same time. So what he wants is an assurance from Stalin that when he goes to fight the West, that Stalin will not interfere and attack him at a vulnerable moment. Okay, so you've got Germany here, and you've got Soviet Union and their enemies. Germany wants Poland, and I'm really naive with war, so I'm guessing that he wants, and somebody help me out wherever I mess up. So why he wants Poland is so that he can then get to his enemy, because that's what he eventually wanted to do, was invade USSR, right? So he needs Poland. But if he's going to fight Poland, France and Britain have already said that they're going to back Poland. So that puts him in a position where he's going to be fighting on two fronts. So now this enemy is going to make a pact with this enemy for a purpose, which I thought was really interesting, because then I always wondered, well, why does Soviet Union make this pact? But he has his reasons too.
That's interesting. So Poland is a part of the Soviet Union. Is that correct, or are they their own people?
At that time, was Poland part of the Soviet Union?
No, they were their own people. They were getting protection from Britain and France.
Okay, so my thing is, so Germany wants to get to the Soviet Union, wants to fight them, but Poland is right in the middle of it, and is Germany, they want Poland. That's
Like a buffer between them and Russia for when they fight them.
okay.
Because you don't want, if you can have a choice between fighting a battle on the grounds of your country where your people are dying and your structures are being destroyed, or you can fight it somewhere else.
Mhm.
You know?
So they're fighting Poland to have that space to fight Soviet Union. That's
yeah,
right.
it's a strategic
Oh, okay, got it.
requirement.
Okay, got it.
If I
That makes
remember
sense.
right, that was his point.
I thought they went through Romania.
Romania is way down here.
Romania was the front between Russia and Germany in
One of
World War II.
He wasn't the only one. Was it?
Well, in this particular battle, it's Britain and France are supporting Poland if Germany attacks Poland. And Germany wants his enemy, and to get to his enemy, he needs to go through Poland. But to go to Poland means Britain and France are going to be after him as well. So, okay, so for this reason, Hitler goes into an alliance with Stalin in 1939, the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, and it has three parts to it. There's non-aggression, that Stalin promises Hitler that he will not attack Germany while Hitler is at war with the West. They put a time frame on this. There was a division as well of the Eastern Europe between themselves into spheres of influence. They said they would take Eastern Europe and divide it between themselves. And then there would be trade payment. Hitler was so isolated, he needed to be able to import from the USSR to fund his war effort. If he was also going to bring in shipments from allies from South or from Asia, he also needed to use the Soviet rail lines. Would that have anything to do with Romania then?
It depends who was allied with at different times.
Maybe not necessarily Romania, but
Those things changed a lot throughout that time period, because they had, you remember when Tess was saying you had to, they were trying to build railways for here, and the other ones are trying to build railways for there, and Stalin and Hitler started to get into contention over trade deals, and they had that 1 month freeze, remember?
I do remember learning about that 1 month freeze.
Yeah, they stopped trade. I think that was the Raffia War. And the North, I think, won, but that's because it was World War II and it's flipped. In our time, the North loses. But anyways, that depending on what country who has, they could build, different structures and economic trading through those places, but it wasn't clean. It wasn't like, oh, this whole country is mine and that whole country is yours. It was like, this piece of this is mine and that piece of that is yours. And they had to realign like who's and what belongs to what. It's complicated. It's not that straightforward. And once it starts to get into the war part of it, we just glean over the major things.
so Germany didn't have the resources for World War II, so the Soviet Union ends up funding that war effort, and Germany is supposed to pay for those imports. This is the logic for why Hitler would want an alliance with his natural enemy. He knows he's about to go to war with the West. Why would Stalin want an alliance with Hitler? That was what I asked. Everybody has their ulterior motive for what they want in the future, because I always thought, why would Stalin do that if he knew what he was wanting to do? Why would he do that? Okay, so what did he have to gain from that? What Stalin was able to do was sit back and watch his greatest enemies destroy each other. So without him having to engage in any effort, he watches Britain and France and Germany begin to destroy and weaken each other. If you have two enemies and they're fighting each other, that gives you the opportunity when they are in their weakest moments to step in and control both. So Stalin wants this war with Western Germany to go on as long as possible, and he's willing to help Hitler if in an effort both Germany and the West are weakened. And out of that agreement, there is also the division of spheres of influence. While Hitler is horrifying the world, Stalin can more easily sneak in and take control of Eastern European countries without repercussion. So these natural enemies begin World War II as allies because of this pact. It was 8 days later, September 1st, when Hitler invaded Poland, and Hitler was taking on three allies, taking on Poland, France, and England, versus Hitler, who has an important ally, the King of the South, USSR. This was the first invasion of World War II.
Wait, what? Okay, Hitler invades Poland, and Hitler was taking three allies, So what does that even mean? She says that Hitler was taking on three allies, which were Poland, France, and England, which is interesting. So that means that
I
Poland,
think it's supposed to say Britain.
Oh, because Poland
yeah.
that he was fighting for. But it says versus Hitler.
Right. So Hitler is taking on Poland that's backed by France and England. He makes an alliance with his enemy to help support it. So he's not fighting his true enemy. He's taking out these other ones first so that he can get close to his true enemy and fight his true enemy.
Right.
So he needs the support of his true enemy to help him to take out these three allies. So Hitler is supported by his ally, which is his enemy.
Poland, France, and England.
No, by Stalin.
Oh. Okay.
Hitler is supported by Stalin.
I get that.
Against the three allies. Okay. So the King of the North and the King of the South are in an alliance against the three allies.
Okay. So the three allies aren't Poland, France, and England.
In Britain, it's Poland, France, and Britain.
Poland, France, and Britain. Okay. But it's just weird because it's saying versus Hitler. That means you're going against Hitler.
Huh?
It's just the way you wrote it.
Yeah.
Oh.
That's the way Tess said it.
I'm just saying because it's versus
it's Hitler against the three allies. But Hitler's backed by Stalin.
Whoa. No, I don't get it. I'm kind of slow because the thing I'm not getting is that I get the part that, okay, he has allies, Poland, France, and Britain. And then versus Hitler, who has an important ally.
Poland, France, and Britain are allied together.
Okay.
Against Hitler.
Okay.
Who's backed by Stalin.
Okay. But why is it saying that he's taking on three allies? Do you get what I'm saying? The three allies are
He knew that if he attacked Poland,
right,
France and Britain were going to help. So he knew a war with Poland meant a war with all three.
Mm-hmm.
Right? He knew a war with Poland would mean a war with all three.
Historically, France, Britain, and Poland were the Allied powers, right? That was like a name that they had. So when it says Hitler's fighting the Allies, it's always going to mean he's fighting France, Britain, and Poland.
Yeah, I get that.
But
he only really wanted
ally means that you have,
a friend.
Right. And that was who Stalin was to Hitler. So he had his own little ally, but they weren't referred to as the big league ally something. It was not like it was a title for them. It was just a relationship they had.
Mm-hmm.
But the name, the Allies, was like a title given to France, Britain, and Poland.
The Allied forces.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm just wondering because if he's taking on, my thing is where I'm confused is if he's taking on the three allies, like they're coming together to fight against the King of the South, right? They're Hitler.
It's the King of the North, actually, that wants Poland. But to take Poland, he has to face all three, and he has to face war on both sides.
But they're his allies, though.
No, they're not Hitler's allies.
Okay.
They're
They're
not
just allies
Hitler's.
with
The
themselves.
three of them are allied together.
Okay.
Hitler is not their ally.
Oh, so when it says 3 allies, is not him taking, it's meaning like he's going against the 3 allies, right there where it
Right.
says and Hitler
Yes. Yeah, because
was
allies
taking
is
on
just
3. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Good morning.
Okay, it finally clicked. Okay.
Hey, Microsoft, you thought of it.
So these natural enemies begin World War II as allies because of this pact. It was 8 days later, September 1st, when Hitler invaded Poland, and Hitler was taking on the 3 allies. So Hitler is taking on Poland, France, and Britain versus Hitler, who has an important ally. Hitler has an important ally, which is the King of the South of the USSR. And this was the first invasion of World War II. You had allies and Axis powers, Susan says. There was an Axis power. What's an Axis power? Somebody want to say? We've got 15 minutes. We better have a few more slides here to go. So from September 1st, Axis were the enemies of allies. Okay. Okay. So just another word for one side or the other. Okay. Okay. So from September 1st, they begin to divide Eastern Europe. The Axis powers, also known as the Axis Alliance, Axis nations, Axis countries, or just the Axis, was the alignment of nations that fought in the Second World War against Allied forces. The Axis grew out of the Anti-Comintern Pact, an anti-communist treaty signed by Germany and Japan in 1936. Thank you for that. Okay, so from September 1st, they begin to divide Eastern Europe into spheres of influence. It has caused some strain, some problems with their allegiance, because they began to argue over certain countries. So it's kind of interesting. This is just the way it works with people. It seems like that you can come into this alliance to make this agreement, but when it comes down to the nitty gritty, you're still going to fight over what you got because one wants more than the other, right? Never satisfied. It wasn't all done with their initial division. Now they have some problems, particularly in the Balkans, Bulgaria, some of those countries. They begin to argue a breakdown over these 2 issues, spheres of influence and trade, which culminates in August 1940. For 1 month, they ceased trade, and that's what you guys were talking about earlier, right?
Yeah.
Okay, for 1 month, they ceased trade, and this is the work of Stalin. He refuses to send any more supplies to Germany for 2 reasons. There's trouble over dividing Europe. Neither side are happy with their share, and there's issues over trade. Hitler isn't paying for his imports. For a whole month, there is a stalemate until they meet in secret and sort out their differences. They redraw the map of Europe and come to an agreement over trade, and their alliance becomes strong again. But Hitler is afraid. He sees how quickly Stalin can cut off his supplies, and he decides that instead of waiting until the end of the war, he's going to do what he intended all the way along, and that was to attack his ally, which is USSR. He is ready for war on 2 fronts, so it was delayed but not prevented. Everybody follow that? He's going to now invade the Soviet Union. June 22nd, 1941, Hitler invaded the Soviet Union. And this was Operation Barbarossa, or known as Beneventum, right? Pam?
Mm-hmm.
It's the largest invasion known in history, covering the furthest amount of territory and with most men. There's never been an invasion known of that surpassed it, and Stalin was taken completely by surprise. So now Hitler has a war on 2 fronts.
Wait, what? Stalin was taken completely by surprise?
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
They were allied.
I know, but wow, that's interesting.
He
but
knew he
Stalin already knew that he was his enemy, though.
But he was wanting the war to continue so that Hitler would be weakened and then he could go in and take everything.
Because
but Hitler,
they had just finished making an agreement that things were okay. But Stalin knew eventually he'd have to fight him, but he thought it was
Right.
going to be way in the future. But Hitler was like, I'm not waiting anymore. I don't like how he can just weasel me around. Let's do it now. And that's it.
And he invades. Then Stalin wasn't prepared for it. This drives Stalin into an alliance. He changes sides. He goes from supporting Hitler into an alliance with the Allies. So now he's going to go join with Poland, France, and Britain. The same people, the Allies that Stalin had helped Hitler to fight, he now joins to fight against Hitler. It's repeating the history of 301 BC, when Demetrius and Pyrrhus and the three allies, where Pyrrhus and Demetrius were fighting. Pyrrhus ends up joining to fight Demetrius in 287 BC. Pyrrhus was Demetrius's ally in that war when they went against the three Seleucus, Lysimachus, and Cassander. So in the history of 1945, by the time we get to the end of that war, you have Germany, Hitler facing an invasion from two sides. From the west, you have a new player, but part of the same alliance. The United States is in alliance with France and Britain from the west. From the east, you have Stalin and the USSR. You see Germany is divided into east and west, and Hitler was defeated. Was either side happy with just their portion? No.
I think it's so interesting that you have the U.S. as allies of France and Britain. That is just so interesting because the U.S. has always kind of been close with France because they actually teamed up to fight against Britain, you know, and their independence, and America getting their independence. But then you also see that U.S. is always kind of still backing Britain, even though they have this kind of crazy relationship themselves, you know? I don't know. It's kind of interesting.
So Susan, do you mean the part about Hitler going in and fighting Stalin and catching him by surprise?
I think it's so interesting.
Yes, that's what I thought. Okay. So this sparked a war, but not a conventional war, a Cold War from 1945 to 1989. It doesn't truly end until 1991. The Soviet Union does not end in 1989, but in 1991. Now you have a Cold War. What did the USA use against the Soviet Union? Subterfuge and sanctions. By the end of this Cold War, the USSR lost power. What did they lose? What did Pyrrhus lose? They lost spheres of influence. He lost everything except the borders of his own country. So the Soviet Union lost everything except for the borders of Russia. Pyrrhus lost everything but the borders of Epirus. And the Soviet Union lost everything except the borders of Russia itself, and it's enough to call that a defeat. Defeated in 1991, beginning in 1989. So you got a wound and a deadly wound, and we got that also from Daniel 11:40, that what happens to the king of the north, compare and contrast, happens to the king of the south. So the king of the south receives a deadly wound, and then he dies, and we know that then he was resurrected for our history. So if we parallel these histories, we can mark a period of 10, a proxy war. So kind of a review here. You have a proxy war, a period of 10. This is where Cassander places a dictator in Athens. So it's like a puppet dictator. And then 10 years later, Demetrius frees Athens from that dictator. Down here, you have 1929. You have the Spanish Civil War here, the 10-year proxy war. I don't know what that noise was. Was that your phone?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. So we recognize the end of the proxy war in Athens and Spain. Then these natural enemies go into an alliance. Demetrius goes into an alliance with Pyrrhus, and we see the introduction of the king of the south. So Demetrius then goes into an alliance with Pyrrhus, and we see the king of the south here. You see an alliance here as well, and you have the king of the south. Germany is going into an alliance with the Soviet Union and Stalin because they have a plan. There's a battle coming. There's an invasion coming. Cassander, Lysimachus, and Seleucus against Antigonus and Demetrius. And Demetrius is supported by Pyrrhus. And that's your battle that's up here. That Seleucus, Cassander, Lysimachus, the three allies, versus Antigonus and Demetrius. And Demetrius is supported by Pyrrhus. So here you have Britain, France, and Poland versus Germany, and Germany is supported by the king of the south. So you got the king of the north supported by the king of the south. This is the history of the Allies against Hitler. Hitler was supported by the Soviet Union. There's a division in Macedonia and a division of Europe. So you got the division of Macedonia and a division in Europe. Then we see their relationship strained, Pyrrhus and Demetrius, as a result of the division. Hitler and Stalin's relationship strained. They fixed their differences, that 1 month of no trade. They fixed their differences, but it's a temporary patch. And it's properly broken when Demetrius invades Epirus and when Hitler invades the Soviet Union. This drives the King of the South back into an alliance with the Allies, Britain, France, and Poland, or Cassander, Lysimachus, and Seleucus, who he had originally opposed. And the King of the North is defeated by the invasion on two fronts.
That's interesting though, but the U.S. defeats the USSR. So they're actually the total, but it's interesting because I'm saying Germany wants to defeat the USSR, right?
Mm-hmm.
And America, the U.S. does it through that war, right?
I'm not following what you're saying.
No, I'm just saying because I guess what I'm saying is that because Hitler wanted to defeat, who is in? Sorry, I guess I'm losing it because who is actually losing? Did Hitler lose? He didn't. He didn't lose, right?
He did in 1945.
Yeah, I know that, but I'm just saying in this. Never mind. I'm just gonna listen.
That's okay because I don't always understand it all either. So they fix their differences, but it's a temporary patch and is properly broken when Demetrius invades Epirus. Okay, this drives the King of the South back into an alliance with the Allies who had originally opposed, and the King of the North is defeated by the invasion on two fronts. So, yeah, but this is where I need Adriana's help, but because the King of the North is defeated, but that's a line of failure.
You have to flip it.
So you flip it, so it's the King of the North wins, right? In the invasion on two fronts. So because we're in the war on two fronts now, correct? Wasn't that it began at Rockville, right? So we're at war on the eastern and the western front now.
Yeah, we've been.
And it's a win for the King of the North.
We've been in the two front war for a while because the World War III shows we've been on both for a while.
Well, when I talk about America, I'm not talking about it as in now. I was talking about it as in
back then.
Yeah, back then, because Hitler is, fighting the.
Well, yeah, because the United States went in and supported the Allied forces.
Right, exactly.
And
That's
defeated Hitler.
Yeah, exactly. But it's interesting because Hitler is wanting to beat Russia, but it's weird how America defeats Hitler, but then also. Russia is defeated, if that means, or not Russia, but the USSR.
Well, they go into a Cold War after that.
Mm-hmm.
They go into a Cold War, which comes up later.
Okay.
So there are two victors. Let's see. He's facing war on two fronts, east and west. There are two victors. They each take a portion of that territory, and you have a Cold War. So there's two victors. Would this mean that if I'm understanding correctly, then the Soviet Union, that's kind of going along with your question, I think. So the Soviet Union and the United States, or Germany, the Allies, let's see.
That's the point. That's why, because the United States is allied with Germany.
Yeah. And
Hitler is defeated, right? But I thought no, it's not Hitler defeated. He eventually gets defeated, but it says, so I'm probably confusing this both.
Right, what are you talking about? The United States is allied with Germany?
At that, when Hitler is, he's opposing the two fronts, right?
Yeah.
Hitler. So then, but you have, the U.S. joins with Germany, right?
No, with Britain, France, and Poland.
Yeah. Okay.
Against Germany.
Yeah.
Right.
But what's left is the Allied forces backed by the U.S. And USSR.
Yeah.
And so the USSR and the US go into a Cold War.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
As a result.
And when Germany stops being a power, then the allies with the US and Russia split Europe down the middle.
But it's interesting how Hitler was trying to accomplish defeating Soviet Union, right? But America actually ends up, and the Allies actually end up doing it.
Yeah, because
they take.
yes, because thank you, Jonathan, for reminding me of that. It's from one of the other studies because the Allied USSR joined with the Allied forces.
Yeah.
So it became the United States, the Allied forces, and the USSR, and took out Germany.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. That's what I'm. Okay.
But
yeah.
as soon as that happened,
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
it was
That's what I'm
literally
saying.
only to take Germany out. And once that was out, because they had that meeting, they're like, all right,
Interesting.
well, once Germany is defeated, this is what you have in Europe and this is what I have in Europe. So they already split Europe before Germany was defeated. They split it up when they came together to defeat Germany.
And this is where Churchill, Roosevelt, and
Yes.
Stalin divide
Yes.
things up.
Yeah.
I don't remember.
That
the
thing
name
that
of
they
those.
try to pretend didn't happen, where
Yeah.
they gave Stalin all that
Warsaw.
stuff.
Isn't it the Warsaw? Never mind. Not the Warsaw. Never
I
mind.
think you're right.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah,
I
it
think
is.
you're right.
Yeah. Oh my man.
Nice. Accidentally got
Second
it.
guess. No, it's called what you call it? Double. I don't know. Uncertainty. Second guessing myself.
Oh.
Yeah.
So you have a Cold War where they're using sanctions and spheres of influence, the King of the North using sanctions and subterfuge, and the King of the South losing his spheres of influence until he is defeated. He says that he thinks the Cold War began a few years after World War II.
Yeah. Because it took a while for the Berlin Wall to even be built. So it was like the tensions were getting worse and worse until it finally, when that Berlin Wall was built and the Iron Curtain proverbially, went up, then you have the Cold War. But tensions were rising because you had a period of time where everyone was so happy, Germany was destroyed, people were like, going back and forth. But then these were ideological enemies, the Allies and the USSR, so it just downhill from there.
So he says that, let's see, they had to sort out a lot of differences after the war.
Yeah.
So at the same point in time that we would have originally said a couple of years ago, the story ends. In Daniel 11:40 ends and the King of the South is defeated, we would have originally thought that. Now we know there's a part B. So we thought that in 1989, 1991, that was the end of the King of the South. That part B is Pyrrhus in Italy, the second part of Pyrrhus's life. And that shows us that the King of the South he's receiving a deadly wound, a death, and then a resurrection. So he's resurrected for this history. Because at the same point in time, something else is happening that shows us this. Who changes its influence here? There's a sphere of influence that changed their allegiance from Tarentum to Rome, from the King of the South to the King of the North, and this sparks a conflict. In 1989, building to 1991, the country of Ukraine changed its allegiance from the Soviet Union to the West. They do it first in 1989 to 1991, but there's a later date, 2014, where they repeat that process. They rejected Russia and choose an alliance with the West. And what was Russia's response? Now it is history with Vladimir Putin.
That's so interesting that Ukraine has always been that special little token. that
I read
pop up.
something about it, and it's called the breadbasket of Europe.
Why?
Because of the amount of people and the kind of resources that you can gain from having that type of influence over that country. It's pretty big compared, for some reason, economically, it's been the breadbasket. I don't know why, but.
So in 2014, Russia attacks the Ukraine. And if you go to the list of sanctions placed on Russia, many of them come from this incident, this conflict of Russia attacking the Ukraine. So, and what was the guy's name? Why can't I think of maybe Adriana remembers his name?
I know.
The Malinsky Act.
Yeah, but
and what's the guy's
Magnitsky.
name? Magnitsky. But what's the other guy's name that I'm trying to think of?
With a B.
Yes, Bill Browder. Bill Browder. Okay.
You're welcome.
Okay. Yeah, the B helped.
The G helped.
Yeah. So there is an escalation again with the King of the South, another history where the King of the North and the King of the South begin to quarrel. We can see that happening in Ukraine, first in 1989 to 1991, right where our first history ends, but then it gets repeated. We get to 2014 and it begins to get repeated. The history of 280 BC begins to come into our history and we begin to make present day applications.
So Ukraine betrays Russia, and that's why they want to they go into attacking Ukraine, right? Because Ukraine it rejects Russia and chooses the West, so therefore it's almost like a betrayal.
Yeah, Susan puts in here, this is so true. Imagine the dismay of Zelensky because he campaigned against corruption and then Trump wants him to do corrupt work for the US. Imagine the confusion that's all going on. And I don't know if confusion is the right word, but when you have the United States in Ukraine playing both sides of the fence,
Yeah.
we're showing you publicly that we want to help you and get rid of all your corruption and fight Russia, your enemy.
Yeah.
But on this little secret side, we want you to come do corrupt stuff for us.
Yeah.
And we're only going to give you money if you do the corrupt stuff we're asking you to do.
So it looks, I'm
That's
looking at
scandalous.
Ukraine. I think it's because it has such a huge mass of land, huge people, but it has a ton of, it borders all that Black Sea area. And to have that communication with the Black Sea and Turkey and the Middle East, and Crimea is what Putin took. And look at Crimea. Crimea is that little island in the Black Sea. Not on my phone, but you can pull it up. But
Well, it'd be easier if you just shared it, if I stopped sharing so that we can at least look at the map.
okay, hold on.
So hang on one second. We have like 2 more slides and then we'll break for lunch, but she's going to do a share screen real quick.
You only
for us.
have one. You're right here. And this is all you have left.
Maybe there's one more slide. I thought there was 30.
But there's no more. Yeah, after that.
I might have divided it into 2 slides. But that's all we have left, you're right. Uh-oh, turn your sound off.
It's hard to do on the phone to turn it completely off. Okay, so you have Ukraine. It's a big landmass in comparatively to the other countries of Europe.
Oh,
And-
yeah,
and
it
then
is
you-
pretty big.
Yeah, and you have all that border with the Black Sea, and then that little island. If you look, not on the map at the top of the screen, but at the bottom left, that little lower. So we'll look at Crimea, where Crimea is.
Okay,
And
so this
that's-
is Crimea?
Yeah, and that's what Putin took.
It's Crimea,
Yeah,
which is part of Ukraine.
it is, but it's right there in the Black Sea, and look how close it is to Turkey.
Okay,
Bam. You get your oil pipelines right in there.
okay, and John
You
put
know?
in here that he just checked and found that Ukraine produced 25% of all agricultural output in the former Soviet Union.
Yeah, so it's a huge, I'm gonna stop share. And
Ports, shipping supplies, very important area.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's
So
another strategic area.
Yeah. But I thought Poland was the first one to mobilize against the USSR because of, what was the name of that? Remember the radio stations and then that group in Poland? When the Soviet Union fell? That,
Radio America,
no.
is that what you're talking about?
Oh, you guys are talking about recently, right? Not in the Soviet Union.
I don't know what you're talking about.
When you said that Ukraine went against Russia? When were you talking about?
But I think she's talking about 2014.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Never
I
mind.
think she's talking about 2014.
I'm all out.
So 2014, Russia attacks Ukraine, and if you go to the list of sanctions, place on, okay, so we read that, we can go back. So we get to 2014, it begins to get repeated. The history of 280 BC begins to come into our history. So 280 here, and I don't have this one finished here yet, So if we go to the history of the Adventism, we would talk about the Alphas and the Omegas, Moses and Christ, Millerites, 144,000. And what is one of the conclusions we come to? We say Moses and Christ, and then we say Millerites and 144,000. How do we know what the end looks like?
By the beginning.
By the beginning. We don't just learn about our history from the history of Christ. We know about our history, so we know about the history from Christ, and we know about the history from Miller. Well, that's interesting because the King of the South was the same way with Pyrrhus and Putin. Pyrrhus was Putin vertical, and Putin was Stalin horizontal. See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Okay. So by the beginning, we don't just learn about our history from Christ. We know about our history because the Alpha tells us the Omega. The history of the Millerites tells us the history of the 144,000. So if we're going to understand our history, where do we look? We look to Millerite history. So when we make our application, we understand the king of the north and the king of the south in this history. We're not just going to take Pyrrhus in Italy. We're not going to learn from the Omega. We have to take the Alpha also. We have to take the history of Stalin and Hitler and World War II and overlay it. In our next study, we're going to take both histories of Alpha and Omega to teach us our own.
So I get what she's saying. Like, you can't just look at Christ's history to see how, even though it is a line of success and it does tell us more about our own history, we still need the Millerite history, and we still need all those, and Moses, the history of Moses, because they all say something about our time right now.
Yeah, because you can look at all the success, but you also need the warning about where not to fail.
Man, that's so true.
He was a comedian, Susan. He was a comedian. And you had to enjoy reading the book, The Warning, then. It's hard not to laugh at that book. And I have to remind myself of the serious times we're living in when I read that stuff. It's so outrageously stupid that it's hard to grasp it. You know, but if you think about it, because we were talking about the oligarchs, you were talking about the oligarchs, that they have the money, but they don't have, what is it? They don't have the personality. They don't have the charisma. What are they missing? Because they have all the money to go, one of them go up and be the leader, right? But they don't do it. They're behind the scenes.
Because no one's going to support them. They have to have the support of the people that connect with them on some basis. That's what Trump did. So he doesn't, because he's not the richest guy in the world with all the bankruptcies, no matter how much he likes to say he is.
I know.
But he allied himself with the people who are going to give him the money and the support. But he made a connection with the people of the Americas.
Yeah.
That
it was at all that prosperity talk. It really was, because everybody, one thing that I noticed that a lot of people have in common that they like about Trump is his business persona, is that he built himself up and he has all this money, you know, and then that show, that platform from that show, The Apprentice, really kicked off because it just showed how this businessman can take action and, you know, find the right people and get the right things.
People liked listening to him say you're fired. They tune in just to see. They'd be glued to watch and hear him be, you know, and it's, I look back and I remember I was living in Elk Grove when the kids were probably really little, but it had to have been after the book came out that I read The Art of the Deal. And long before I ever picked up a Bible, but I remember reading it. But I was reading it for reasons of thinking the same thing that maybe some of them are too, you know, not because I wanted to be rich or anything like that, but you wanted to read these stories that seem like stories of success. But what we're realizing, he's not a story of success. He's a story of fraud all around. But they don't know that.
No, well, maybe people are like, hey, this guy's on my level of intelligence. I can relate to him. If he's rich, I can do it too.
Maybe that was it. I don't know. But I remember reading it, thinking that, you know, because back in the day, that was when I worked at Nordstrom, and don't want to say I was all about success, but I knew my job required success. But I mean, you know, I looked at things like that. I read motivational things like that. I read it as like a motivational type thing. And so people do that and they don't know what he's really about. And he's being exposed for what he's really about.
Yeah, I was just chuckling at Sister Susan because she says that Trump wanted to copyright the saying "you're fired," and that's just hilarious to me because, you know, so many people say that. Like, I remember I never watched that show Apprentice. I never liked The Apprentice, but I did like Shark Tank and all those other kind of like business shows like Shark Tank. But anyways, the thing is that when you have people saying you're fired, they take that statement and they make it out of a joke. You know, it's like someone says something wrong, like at the job or something, you know, like if you have coworkers or whatever, and then someone says you're fired because of something silly you do, but they're just kidding around. Mm-hmm. I mean, just saying phrases like that, you know, it's just people do it, whether, I don't know, they really like him or not, but it was catchy.
I think it was Michael Moore who was pointing out that in that show, he would actually fire the people that everyone who was watching hated. So it felt like justice to them. So it
Oh,
endeared them
wow.
to him.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
And it built that kind of like, yeah, he's gonna fire the right people. And so he hired all the people and fired his own hired people and the
Wow.
president. But I've seen a interview with, I don't remember who did this, what channel it was on, maybe it was a Vox thing, but they interviewed a bunch of females on, you know, politics and the state of equality and rights and Trump and all of this stuff. And the ones that were supported for him were like, yeah, I like the fact that he's a businessman and he's going to make our country prosperous and bring up the economy and all this. And I'm like, look at if you read that article that we read that one day where it goes, that first article in 1979 that was done about him that went through all his New York business deals, they were corrupt.
Yes.
Every single one of them. When he won the presidency, he just got out of the scandal with his fake university that Kris Jenner was championing, that, you know, because she's such a university person.
We better break for lunch.
It's all like corrupt, and I don't know, people don't see past that. It's like you don't make the effort to study. It's the same thing as in this movement. You don't make the effort to look into things. What are you going to know? You're going to be easily fooled. You have to look at the old paths of history.
You want to pray for?
Sure.
Did you guys already pray for Sister Tony?
Yes.
Earlier, yeah. Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, we thank you for this day. We thank you for that awesome study that we had and earlier this morning as well. We thank you for the fellowship that we continue to be able to have, where we can speak freely about these things without any fear of real violent, horrible repercussions. Lord, we're in a time of peace, a time that we get to grow and learn and still spend beautiful time with you. Please be with us and guide us in our studies. Help us to find the truths that you want us to know, and strengthen us in our ability to search out for these hidden treasures by ourselves also, Lord. Help us to be better at contributing and helping others as well. Help us to continue to grow in our understanding of equality and rights and conspiracy theories and all these issues. And please bless also the food that we're about to partake of as we break. Bless it, help it to strengthen and nourish our bodies. Bless the hands that prepared it, and help it get us through this day. We also ask for no rain this evening if possible, and also to be with all the people who are struggling with different pains and aches and family situations and everything that is going on all around us. We thank you when we pray all these things in the Lord Jesus Christ's name. Amen.
Amen. Okay, so we're gonna